You know that feeling? Staring at the screen, watching the market jump up and down every single second? It can be exhausting, right? Well, what if I told you there's another way? A strategy called position trading. And it's all about ignoring that daily chaos and instead focusing on the real story. Let's dig into what that actually means.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to walk through the whole journey, step by step. We'll look at how these traders think, how they build their confidence in a company, and how they deal with those scary market drops. And to make this super clear, we're going to follow one single example from beginning to end. Okay, so what's the big idea here? It really starts with a completely different mindset. You've heard the saying, right? Can't see the forest for the trees? Well, a position trader is all about the forest. They're not getting lost in the weeds. They're looking at the health of the whole ecosystem.
And this really breaks it down, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the day trader, totally glued to their screen, reacting to every little price jump, every tick, over minutes, maybe hours. But then you've got the position trader. They take a huge step back. We're talking a timeline of months or even years. They couldn't care less about the tiny price ticks. What they care about is the story of the business itself. And that story comes from some serious deep dive analysis.
All right, theory is great, but how does this actually work in the real world? Let's make this tangible. We're going to invent a company, a retail chain we'll call BrightMart, and we're going to use it to see exactly how a position trader builds that concrete, long-term belief, what we call an investment thesis. So what does that research actually look like? Well, a position trader is like a detective, building a case piece by piece. They look at BrightMart and see, okay, wow, a decade of steady earnings growth, that's a solid foundation. Then they check the books. Is the debt manageable? Yep, it is. That's huge because it means profits aren't just getting swallowed by interest. Are they sharing the love with shareholders? You bet. A history of increasing dividends. And what's the future look like? They're expanding, and the whole sector is getting a boost from consumer spending. See? Each one of these is a building block for their argument.
And after all that digging, it boils down to something like this. A simple but really powerful statement. This is the investment thesis. And let's be clear, this isn't some random hunch. It's a clear, well-reasoned belief. And from this moment on, this thesis is the anchor for absolutely everything they do with this investment.
Okay, so you've done all the homework, you've built this rock-solid thesis. Easy part's over. Now comes the really hard part. Because as we all know, the market never, ever moves in a nice, clean, straight line. What happens next? This is the ultimate test of your conviction.
And then it happens. The whole market takes a dive, and BrightMart stock drops 10%. Right here, this is the moment of truth. For so many people, the gut reaction is pure panic. Sell, sell, sell. But not for the position trader. For them, this triggers a very specific and, frankly, a very different kind of question.
And this question, it is absolutely everything. They ask themselves, okay, has anything fundamental changed about my story? Did BrightMart's finances just fall off a cliff? Nope. Did they suddenly cancel all their expansion plans? Nope. Did a decade of consumer trends just reverse overnight? Of course not. So if the answer to all of that is no, well then the price drop is just noise. It's not a real problem with the company. The original thesis is still valid, and the most logical thing to do is nothing. You hold.
All right, we've been walking through the story with BrightMart, but let's put some official names to the tools and concepts we've been talking about. Because this strategy isn't just based on a gut feeling, right? It's all built on a solid foundation of real analytical ideas. The absolute heart of this whole thing is something called fundamental analysis. Remember all that digging we did into BrightMart's earnings, its debt, its plans for the future? That's it. That's fundamental analysis. It's basically the detective work you do to figure out what a business is really worth.
And this brings us right back to our friend BrightMart. That decade of solid earnings growth, that wasn't just some random nice-to-know factoid. No way. It was a giant flashing sign pointing to a healthy, growing company. It was one of the biggest reasons the whole thesis held together. And last but not least, you have to remember that no company is an island. You have to understand the big picture, the market cycle. Think about that rising consumer demand that was helping out BrightMart's whole sector. That's crucial context. It helps you figure out if the wind is at the company's back or if it's blowing right in its face.
Okay, this is a really important point. Position trading is definitely a long-term game, but that does not mean it's a buy-and-forget strategy. Absolutely not. Having a clear, disciplined plan for when to get out is just as critical as knowing when to get in.
So, take a look at these reasons to sell. Notice something? Not one of them says because the stock price dropped 10%. The decision to exit is always tied back to the original story. So, if BrightMart's profits suddenly started tanking, or if its debt was getting out of control, or maybe the whole outlook for retail just collapsed, that's when the thesis is broken. That is your signal to head for the exit.
So let's put it all together. This is basically the whole playbook right here. First, you research the big picture. Then you analyze a specific company, just like we did with BrightMart. From that, you build your long-term thesis. You pick your spot to get in. Then comes the tough part. You hold through the noise. And finally, you only exit when that original story fundamentally changes. It's a clear, logical process from start to finish.
Look, if you take just one thing away from all this, please let it be this. Position trading is about investing in the business story, not the daily stock price. You're investing in a company's future, its health, its strategy. The day-to-day price flicker, that's just a footnote in a much bigger book. And that brings me to a final question for you to think about. If you put on this hat, this position trader mindset, what long-term stories are unfolding right now that maybe, just maybe, all the short-term market noise is drowning out? Thinking about that? Well, that might just lead you to your next big idea.